In the world of technology, no empire seemed more permanent than Intel. For decades, the Intel Inside logo was a symbol of absolute computing dominance. At its peak, Intel controlled over 80% of the global PC market and more than 95% of the lucrative server market. They didn't just make chips, they defined the digital age. But in late 2024, the unthinkable happened. Intel was officially kicked off the Dow Jones Industrial Average, replaced by NVIDIA. Its stock value had cratered. Massive layoffs of over 15,000 workers were announced, and the company was bleeding billions of dollars. To make matters worse, their flagship 13th and 14th generation CPUs were physically self-destructing on customers, causing global headlines about crashes and instability. How did the most powerful chipmaker in human history fall this far? This is the autopsy of Intel, a story of how strategic arrogance, manufacturing stagnation, and a single missed phone call allowed competitors to rip the crown from the king of Silicon Valley. Intel's decline didn't start in 2024. It started in 2005 with a secret negotiation that would change the trajectory of modern computing forever. Steve Jobs approached Intel's then CEO, Paul Otellini, with a proposal. Apple wanted Intel to build the processor for a secret new project, a mobile device that would eventually be called the iPhone. Intel looked at the numbers, estimated what Apple was willing to pay, and did something shocking. They said no.
Otellini believed the iPhone would never sell enough units to justify the high development costs of a custom, low-power chip. It was a fatal miscalculation. The iPhone went on to sell over 2 billion units, sparking the smartphone revolution. Because Intel walked away, Apple partnered with Samsung, and the entire mobile industry standardized on ARM-based architectures rather than Intel's x86. Intel, the king of the PC, was completely locked out of the biggest computing boom in human history. For years, Intel survived the smartphone mistake because they still held a monopoly on PCs and servers. They relied on their famous tick-tock manufacturing model, alternating every year between shrinking the size of their transistors, tick, and introducing a new architecture, tock. But monopoly breeds complacency. Around 2014, Intel attempted to transition from its highly successful 14-nanometer node to a new, denser 10-nanometer manufacturing process. They hit a technical wall. Intel's engineers had made the target density too complex, causing massive yields of defective chips. Instead of admitting the failure and adjusting, Intel's leadership, then run by financial executives rather than engineers, kept pushing the deadline back. For nearly 6 years, Intel remained stuck on the 14-nanometer node, re-releasing the same basic chip architecture with minor speed boosts while running hotter and consuming more power. Meanwhile, their main competitor was watching. While Intel stagnated, their historic rival, AMD, was on the brink of bankruptcy. In 2014, AMD appointed a new CEO, Dr. Lisa Su, an electrical engineer. She made a massive bet. Instead of trying to manufacture chips themselves, AMD spun off their factories and focused purely on design, outsourcing the actual physical manufacturing to TSMC, a Taiwanese semiconductor company. In 2017, AMD launched the Zen architecture, branded as Ryzen. Unlike Intel's massive, expensive single-die chips, AMD introduced a revolutionary chiplet design. They built smaller, cheaper-to-make processor blocks and stitched them together. While Intel was still struggling to build 10-nanometer chips in its own factories, TSMC leapt ahead to 7-nanometer and eventually 5-nanometer manufacturing nodes. By outsourcing to TSMC, AMD was suddenly delivering chips that were faster, ran cooler, and were cheaper to buy than Intel's. Intel went from mocking AMD to losing massive market share in both consumer PCs and lucrative corporate data centers.
The final proof of Intel's decline arrived in 2020. Frustrated by Intel's constant roadmap delays and thermal issues, Apple announced they were leaving Intel entirely, transitioning all Mac computers to their own custom ARM chips, Apple Silicon.
Because today is going to be a truly historic day for the Mac. The Mac has had 3 major transitions in its history, and now it's time for a huge leap forward for the Mac. Because today is the day we're announcing that the Mac is transitioning to our own Apple Silicon.
Apple's new chips delivered double the battery life and superior performance compared to the Intel chips they replaced. It was the ultimate public embarrassment for the x86 giant. By the time Intel launched a desperate recovery plan under new engineer CEO Pat Gelsinger in 2021, they were fighting a multi-front war. They had to build new foundries to catch up to TSMC, fight AMD for CPU dominance, and somehow catch up to NVIDIA in the sudden AI revolution.
Intel did not fail because of bad luck. They failed because they behaved like a monopolist. They prioritized short-term financial margins over engineering excellence, ignored mobile because the profits looked too small, and assumed their size would protect them from competitors who were hungry and focused. Silicon Valley does not care about past legacy. In the semiconductor industry, if you stop innovating for even a single year, you are not just falling behind. You are performing your own autopsy.